My phone was face down on the kitchen counter when it buzzed, a soft vibration against the cool laminate that I felt more in my teeth than in my ears. And I didn't pick it up right away because I was standing over a pot of simmering broth, stirring it with a wooden spoon that had absorbed the oil and salt of 100 previous meals, watching the steam curl upward in lazy, translucent ribbons that carried the scent of roasted garlic and thyme, the kind of scent that wraps around your shoulders like a heavy wool blanket and tells you, without words, that you are safe here, that you are held, that you are exactly where you are supposed to be on a quiet Tuesday evening when the rest of the world is busy rushing toward things it hasn't even decided it wants yet. And I remember thinking, with a clarity that felt almost physical, that this was a good evening, that the quiet was mine, that I had finally built a life that didn't require me to constantly apologize for taking up space in it. And then I set the spoon down on the edge of the pot, wiped my hands on the linen towel hanging from the oven handle, and picked up the phone, turning it over to see a single notification glowing against the dark screen. A text from my brother, and I read it once, just the bare bones of it, the blunt architecture of the words. And then I read it again, slower this time, letting each syllable settle into the room like dust after a door has been slammed. And then I set the phone down very carefully, the way you set down something fragile when your hands have gone slightly numb and you need the surface to hold it for you, and I turned off the stove, watching the flame shrink and disappear beneath the burner. Knowing the soup wouldn't finish cooking that night, knowing I wouldn't eat it, knowing that something inside me had just shifted its weight, and I let myself back up because this story doesn't actually begin with that text. It begins years earlier, in a hospital waiting room in Cincinnati, where the fluorescent lights hummed at a frequency that made my molars ache, where the vinyl chairs were cracked in the exact same places from years of exhausted bodies sliding into them, where my mother had called me instead of my brother because she said, and I remember the exact cadence of her voice, the slight tremor she tried to hide behind practicality, that I was the one who handles things. And I was 28 then, freshly promoted at a job that paid just enough to feel proud, but not enough to feel secure, living in an apartment I had furnished slowly and deliberately. One second-hand bookshelf, at a time, one carefully chosen rug at a time, because I liked the feeling of earning each object, of knowing exactly what it cost me and exactly what it was worth, while my brother was 31, working a sales job he complained about daily, but never quit, dating a woman I had met exactly 6 times, carrying himself with the easy, unearned confidence of someone who has always assumed the ground will rise to meet his feet, and my mother had called him a good heart, the way she always did, the way parents do when they want to excuse 1,000 small absences with one large, glowing label. And I had nodded along, swallowing the quiet resentment that comes from watching someone be praised for their potential, while you are quietly thanked for your labor. And my father survived that second heart attack. Though survival, in those circumstances, is a heavy, complicated word that carries the weight of hospital bills, of physical therapy appointments, of medications that need to be refilled on strict schedules, of a house 40 minutes outside the city that was paid off but slowly surrendering to neglect, the gutters clogged with autumn leaves, the back porch steps bowing under years of untreated rot, the furnace making a sound like something dying every time it kicked on in the winter, and my brother lived 20 minutes away while I lived 4 hours away. Yet I still ended up being the one who handled things, who called the contractors, who negotiated the payment plans, who sat on hold with insurance companies while my coffee went cold, who drove home on weekends to sit in my childhood bedroom and fill out forms that required signatures and dates and proof of residence. And I am not telling you this to paint myself as a martyr. I am telling you this because I need you to understand the soil this story grew from, the quiet, unspoken contract I signed with my family long before I knew what a contract was. The belief that love is measured in availability, that loyalty is proven through exhaustion, that being the steady hand means you never get to be the one who needs to be held. And I was the kind of person who said yes before she had time to check her own calendar. The kind of person who transferred money before she was even asked because the asking felt like a friction I wanted to spare everyone. The kind of person who sat in her car after long drives and took 3 deep breaths and told herself that this is what family is. This is what it looks like when you care. This is fine. Even when it wasn't fine. even when it was slowly draining the color from my days, even when I realized I was living my life in the margins of everyone else's emergencies. And my brother got engaged on a Thursday in October, the kind of crisp autumn day that makes everything feel temporary and beautiful, and he sent a photo to the family group chat of her hand resting on a sunlit table, the ring catching the light, in a way that looked expensive, and I typed congratulations. My mother sent a cascade of heart emojis. My father sent a single thumbs up, which was the most he had ever communicated digitally in his life, and I knew he was genuinely happy. And my brother called me that same evening, and we talked for 40 minutes, which was longer than we had spoken in the previous 3 months combined, and he was loose and warm and almost like the brother I remembered from when we were teenagers. When he used to drive me to school and let me pick the music even though he hated what I liked, and I felt myself relax into it, felt myself believe that maybe this was a reset, maybe this was the thing that would finally bring everyone back to the same table, and he mentioned, somewhere around the 30-minute mark, that the wedding was going to be a production, his exact word laughing as he said it, telling me his fiancée had always dreamed of a big wedding, 300 guests, a venue with a view of the water, a reception that stretched until midnight, and I asked if they had a budget figured out, and he said they were working on it, and I said that sounded exciting, and he said, "You know, you've always been so good with money," and I should have paid more attention to that sentence, should have heard the quiet scaffolding being built around me, should have recognized it as the beginning of a request disguised as a compliment, but instead, I heard it as appreciation, as acknowledgement, as my brother finally seeing me clearly after years of looking slightly past me, and I said thank you. And he said, "I'm really glad we have you," and I said, "I'm really glad too." And we hung up, and I sat with the warm feeling of that for about a week before the reality of it began to settle. Before the first casual mention of a venue deposit coming up, before the quiet pause that lived between the words, before the unspoken sentence hung in the air waiting for me to fill it, and I did. I always did. I transferred $7,000 the following Friday, telling myself it was a loan, though I never wrote that down, never asked him to sign anything, never made it formal because formality felt like a betrayal of the kind of family I wanted us to be, and that was my first mistake, the quiet assumption that love operates outside the rules of accounting, that generosity doesn't require boundaries, that giving without keeping track means the giving is pure, when in reality it just means you are slowly teaching people that your resources have no bottom, that your silence means consent, that your reliability is an infinite well they can draw from without ever needing to look down to see how deep it goes. And over the next 14 months the contributions continued, never framed as direct requests but always presented as situations. A catering deposit that needed to be secured, a florist whose invoice arrived earlier than expected, a photographer whose rate increased after the initial consultation, and my brother would call, tell me about the situation. Let the pause stretch just long enough to become a question, and I would fill it every single time, transferring the money, saving the invoices, updating a spreadsheet only I ever opened, telling myself that this is what you do for the people you love, that you cover the gaps, that you don't keep score. And by the spring before the wedding, I had contributed $47,000, a number I want you to sit with for a moment, not as an abstract figure on a screen, but as the vacation I hadn't taken. The car I was still driving past the point where the transmission started slipping. The retirement contribution I dropped from 8% to 4%. The dental work I postponed. The new mattress I slept on that sagged in the middle because replacing it felt selfish when there were deposits to cover. And I gave it, all of it. And I told myself that's what you do for the people you love, never allowing myself to see the quiet erosion happening beneath the surface, never letting myself notice that I was funding a dream I wasn't being allowed to shape. And what I did not know, what I would not discover until much later, was that during those same 14 months, my brother and his fiancée had been on 2 international trips, a fact I learned from a photo my cousin accidentally posted in a family logistics chat instead of her personal feed, a photo of them in Bali, standing on a balcony overlooking an infinity pool, cocktails garnished with tropical flowers resting on the railing behind them. And when I saw that photo, something shifted inside me, not a dramatic break, but a hairline, crack, the kind you don't notice until the weight finally causes it to split. And I didn't say anything. I just filed it away somewhere quiet and kept going, kept transferring, kept updating the spreadsheet, kept telling myself that the money was an investment in their happiness, ignoring the fact that I was investing in a day I was being quietly prepared to watch from a distance. And I was not a bridesmaid, and I want to be straightforward about this because it matters, because it shows how deeply the exclusion was woven into the fabric of the event, because it proves that my role was never that of a participant but that of a utility, a quiet engine keeping the logistics running while the celebration happened around me. His fiancée had 5 bridesmaids, her sister, 3 college friends, a woman I had never heard of. My brother had 5 groomsmen. I was not asked to do a reading, I was not given a seat at the family table, and when I asked my mother, gently, if there was a role for me, she said the wedding party was already very decided, that I should just focus on being there to celebrate, and I focused on being there to celebrate. I bought a dress in a soft charcoal color that I thought would photograph well. I arranged to take time off work. I booked a hotel room in the city, where the wedding was being held 2 nights, because I thought maybe after the wedding we could all have breakfast together. The slow kind. The kind that turns into 3 hours without anyone noticing. The kind where you finally get to sit across from your brother and remember who he was before the years of assumptions and unspoken expectations built a wall between you. The save the date had my name on it. I kept it on my refrigerator, held up by a magnet shaped like a lemon, and that's how things stood on a Tuesday evening in March, when my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter and I set down my soup spoon. And the text was not long. It said, "Hey, so we've been going back and forth on the final guest list, and we're running out of room. The venue has a hard cap and we're over. We're going to have to move some people to a virtual option. I know this isn't ideal, but we figured you'd be cool. Since you're so understanding, you can watch the live stream, and we'll save you a slice of cake, lol." And that was it. That was the whole message. You can watch the live stream, and we'll save you a slice of cake, lol. And I read it 4 times. Not because I didn't understand it, but because I understood it completely, and I was waiting to feel something other than what I felt, which was a cold and clarifying calm. The kind of calm that settles over a room after a loud noise finally stops. After the waiting is over, after the question you've been asking yourself for years finally gets answered in the most brutal, honest way possible. And I thought about the $47,000. I thought about Bali. I thought about the photo of his fiancée's hand with the ring that I had helped pay for, without knowing that's what I was doing in all those deposits and invoices and situations. I thought about my mother saying, "You're the one who handles things." And then I thought about something I had never let myself think before, which was, what exactly am I handling? And for whom? And what have I ever received in return? And I put the phone face down on the counter. I didn't respond that night. I went to work the next day. I had a normal day. I answered emails. I ate lunch at my desk. I had a meeting that ran 15 minutes over the way meetings always do. I drove home. I made dinner something simple, eggs and toast. I wasn't hungry for anything that took effort. And then I sat down at my laptop. And I want to tell you that I was not angry when I did what I did next. I think anger would be easier to explain. Anger has a shape. Anger has a direction. Anger wants to be seen, but what I felt that evening was something quieter than anger. It was done. There's a difference between those 2 things that I think is important. Anger is a fire. What I felt was an exhale. It was simply a decision, made very clearly, with both hands, the way you might decide to finally throw out something that has been taking up space in your home for too long, something you've been keeping out of guilt, out of habit, out of the quiet fear that if you let it go, you'll be left with an empty shelf that reminds you of everything you failed to hold on to. And I opened my bank's payment portal. The final catering balance of $12,000 was due in 3 weeks. I had already been sent the invoice. My name was listed as the responsible party because of course it was. Because I was the one who handles things. Because I had never corrected the assumption. Because I had quietly accepted the role of the financial backbone while being handed a virtual seat. And I logged in, I pulled up the scheduled payment, I canceled it, then I found the other one, the final venue installment, $6,000 due the following month. I canceled that too. I sat back in my chair, and I'm not going to pretend there was no satisfaction in it. There was, but it wasn't the hot, electric satisfaction of revenge that you see in movies. It was something more like the feeling after you've finally had a difficult conversation you've been avoiding for months. A kind of bone-deep relief, the body unknotting itself, the shoulders dropping, the breath finally reaching the bottom of your lungs. And I didn't send a text. I didn't call. I didn't write an explanation. I closed the laptop and went to bed. And my phone started buzzing at 7:14 the next morning. My brother. 5 calls in 20 minutes. Which was more than he'd called me in the previous 6 months combined. And I watched the screen light up and go dark and light up again. And I thought about all the Tuesday evenings I had transferred money while he was apparently booking resort hotels on an island. And I didn't answer. And my mother called at 7:52. Then his fiancée, from a number I recognized from previous wedding logistics calls. Then my mother again. And I got dressed. I made coffee. I drove to work. And I want to be clear about something. I was not ignoring them out of cruelty. I was ignoring them because I had spent 4 years prioritizing their comfort at the direct expense of my own, and I needed for the first time in a long time to exist in a few hours that were entirely mine, that no one's panic could reach, that no one's disappointment could penetrate. And my coworker, who has known me for 3 years, and once told me she worried about how much I did for my family, asked if I was okay when she saw me. She said I looked different. I said I thought I was. She looked at me for a moment and said, "Good different." And I thought about it and said yes, good different. And I called my mother back that evening. She was not calm. She spoke for a long time about the catering company, about the venue, about how my brother had already told his fiancé's family everything was handled, about how humiliating it would be, about how I couldn't just do this without warning, and I let her finish. I let her words hang in the air until they ran out of momentum. And then I said, I was asked to watch the wedding on a live stream, and there was a pause, a heavy, familiar pause, and I said, he texted me that I was being moved to a virtual option. He said I could watch the live stream, and he'd save me some cake, and another pause, and my mother said, I'm sure he didn't mean it like that. And there it was. That sentence, the one I had heard in various forms my entire life, applied to various things my brother had done that were, in fact, exactly like that. He didn't mean it. He doesn't always think. He has. A good heart, you know how he is. You're so much better at handling these things than he is. And I said very quietly, I know exactly how he meant it, Mom. And she started to say something about the deposit being non-refundable, about the other vendors, about the timeline, about the domino effect of my silence. And I said I understood that there were logistical consequences. I said I was sorry for those, genuinely, because I am not a person who enjoys watching things fall apart. I just refused to be the reason they stay together at the cost of my own foundation. And what I was not sorry for was the decision itself. And she said she didn't understand what had gotten into me. And I thought about how to answer that. I thought about it for a moment, and then I said, nothing got into me, I just stopped. And she said, stopped what? And I said, filling in the silence. And she didn't say anything. The line went quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when someone realizes the ground has shifted beneath them and they don't know how to adjust their footing. And I said I loved her. I said goodnight. I hung up, and my brother texted me 2 days later. Not a call, a text, which I thought said something about the distance he preferred to keep between himself and accountability. The text was long. It covered several things. The stress they'd been under. How much this wedding meant to his fiancée. How he'd thought I would understand. How he'd always been able to count on me. How this felt like a betrayal. He used the word betrayal twice, and I read it carefully, tracing the shape of his panic, recognizing the familiar pattern of someone who has never had to face the consequences of their own assumptions. And then, I wrote back. I want to share exactly what I wrote because I spent a long time on it. Because I wanted it to be clear, without being cruel, because I wanted it to hold the truth without handing him a weapon to use against me later. And I said, I've contributed $47,000 to this wedding over the past 14 months. I don't say that to hold it over you. I gave it willingly, but when I gave it, I believed I was contributing to something I was part of. When you texted me to say I'd been moved to a virtual option, I understood that I wasn't. I canceled the remaining payments because I'm not going to fund an event I'm not invited to attend. I love you. I hope you figure out a path forward. And he didn't respond for 6 days. When he did, the text said, we had to scale back the wedding significantly. I hope you're happy. And I sat with that for a long time. I thought about whether I was happy. I thought about Bali, and the heart emojis, and the furnace sound, and the parking lot in Cincinnati, and all those Tuesday evenings in my kitchen. I thought about the dress I'd bought that was still in the bag in my closet. I thought about the hotel room I'd canceled. I thought about my coworker saying good different, and I wrote back one thing. I hope you have a beautiful wedding, and I meant it. I genuinely did. I wasn't angry. I wasn't celebrating anyone's difficulty. I just wasn't going to pay for it anymore, and the wedding happened. I know this because my mother sent me a photo not through the family group chat, which had gone very quiet, but directly, just the two of us. It was a photo of my brother and his wife on what looked like a smaller venue than originally planned. Outside, with maybe 80 people visible in the background, they were smiling. She looked beautiful. He looked happy. And I looked at the photo for a long time. I felt something complicated when I saw it. Not regret, exactly. But something with weight to it. The particular sadness of loving people who don't quite see you and knowing that you can love them and still refuse to disappear for them. Those two things can both be true. I've learned that. I saved the photo. I didn't go. I didn't watch the live stream either. In case you're wondering. I took myself to dinner at a restaurant I'd been wanting to try for 8 months, the kind of place where you need a reservation and the lighting is good. And they bring you bread that you didn't ask for. And I sat at a table by the window. I ordered. What I wanted, I left a generous tip, and on the drive home I thought about something my grandmother used to say, which was that the things you do for love should feel like a gift, not a toll. She said it once, about something completely unrelated years ago. And I never thought about it much at the time. But it came back to me that night, very clearly. The way things do when you've finally done the thing that makes them make sense. I had been paying a toll for years. I had been paying it and calling it love and telling myself the distinction didn't matter. But it matters. It matters so much, because a toll doesn't build anything. It just keeps the gate closed until you pay again. And love doesn't work that way. Love opens gates. Love doesn't keep score. Love doesn't make you disappear to prove you belong. And things are different now. Not resolved. I don't want to give you the impression that there was some conversation that fixed everything and everyone understood, and we all moved forward clean. That's not what happened. My brother and I speak occasionally, holidays mostly. The warmth from that engagement phone call the night he said, "I'm so glad we have you." I haven't found that again with him. Maybe it will come back eventually, maybe it won't. I've made my peace with not knowing. And my mother and I have a better relationship now. Strangely, not despite what happened, I think. Because of it. She knows I have a line now. And knowing I have a line has made her careful with me in a way she wasn't before. She asks about my life in a more specific way. She mentioned my savings once, admiringly, which she had never done. Small things. But small things are often how big things begin. And I have not been asked to handle anything financially for my family since that night. And I'm not going to lie and tell you that doesn't feel like a loss in some small way. Part of me. The part that was trained from childhood to equate being useful with being loved. Sometimes misses the calls, misses being needed. That's real. And I think it's worth saying out loud because healing isn't a straight line. It's a spiral. You circle back to the same pain but from a different height. And there's another part of me, the part that's been growing since that night. At my kitchen counter, that feels something I don't have a perfect word for. Not proud exactly, not relieved exactly. Something like present, like I am finally in my own life instead of constantly circling someone else's. And my apartment feels more like mine now. I don't know exactly how to explain that. Nothing. Changed in it. Same furniture. Same view. Same soup on the stove on Tuesday evenings. But it feels different when I walk through the door. It feels like somewhere I chose. Not somewhere I retreated to. Not somewhere I'm hiding. But a place I actively decided to inhabit. And I have a friend who, when I told her the whole story, All of it, including the parts I was not proud of. The years of transfers and silence, and filling in the pause, said something I've thought about a lot since. She said, "You didn't do anything wrong by giving. The problem was that you gave yourself permission to give without giving yourself permission to stop." And I think that's right. I think a lot of us, especially those of us who were raised to handle things, to be reliable, to take pride in being the person everyone calls, we learn how to give very well. And we never learn that stopping is also an option, that it's not abandonment, that it's not cruelty, that sometimes the most honest thing you can do for a relationship is to stop pretending it's something it isn't. And I'm not the person I was 4 years ago. I'm not sure I could go back to her even if I wanted to. I understand things, now that I didn't understand then, about how generosity can be quietly exploited, without anyone fully meaning for it to happen, about how silence can become a kind of contract, about how the people who call you the reliable one and the one who handles things are sometimes telling you what they need you to be, rather than who you actually are. And I handle things now, too, just different things, my own things, the soup I make on Tuesday evenings. I finish it now, I eat it from a good bowl, one I picked out myself, and I don't check my phone until I'm done. That might sound like a small thing, but it isn't. It's the difference between living in reaction and living in intention. It's the difference between being a backup plan for everyone else and being the main event for yourself. And if you've ever been the one in your family who just kept giving, kept showing up, kept transferring, kept filling the silence, I want you to know something. You are allowed to stop. Not because the people you love don't matter, but because you do too. You matter too. Your time matters. Your energy matters. Your dreams are not optional expenses. They are the foundation of the life you were meant to build. And you don't owe anyone your exhaustion. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone your disappearance. And the people who love you for what you provide will eventually learn to love you for who you are, or they won't. And either way, you'll know where you stand. And standing is better than kneeling, always. And the toll booth is closed now. The gate is open. The road ahead is mine, and I'm finally driving it. Do subscribe.